People often say rock is the scream of the rebellious. But if rebellion had a face, that face would be Kerry King's, the bald-headed guitarist with a chain that weighs a full kilo, the man who made the world bow before a sound so fast, ruthless, and frighteningly real. For more than 4 decades, he hasn't just played guitar, he has declared war against hypocrisy, against religion, and against the very limits metal once had. Behind those thunderous riffs lies a paradoxical truth. The man covered in demonic tattoos has never used drugs, never fallen, never betrayed himself. While countless metal legends collapsed in hallucination and self-destruction, Kerry King has remained, sober, disciplined, and alone. It is that sobriety that makes him different, one who seeks no salvation, no pity. He needs only one thing: music so honest it can burn every lie to ashes. Let us explore the journey of a legendary guitarist, a man who chose to stay clear-minded in a mad world, loyal amid betrayals, and silent among the screamers. Let us explore Kerry King, the man who doesn't need to be loved, only to be heard. Before that blazing red light ever shone on a bald guitarist with a chain weighing nearly a kilo, Kerry King was just a quiet boy in a small house in Los Angeles. Born on June 3, 1964, he was the youngest of 3 children, a loved child, but never one truly understood. His father was an aircraft parts inspector, a man who believed everything in life had to be precise to the millimeter. His mother, a phone company employee, was the kind of woman who worked tirelessly. No dreams, no complaints. In a household where everything ran like clockwork, Carrie was the one part that didn't fit. The King family was neither rich nor tragic, but they had one clear principle: raise your children through guidance, not fear. And to that strict father, the best form of guidance was to give his son something that could protect him from the bad influences out there. One afternoon, he placed his old Gibson ES 175 in Carrie's hands. No sentimentality, no speech, just a plain statement. Try learning this. It'll keep your mind busy. But that single moment awakened something inside Carrie, a force even he didn't know he possessed. The ability to turn silence into a roar. At 13, he didn't start playing guitar to become a star, but because every vibration of the strings brought him peace. He practiced so obsessively that his parents had to remind him to go to bed. At school, Carrie was a different kind of kid. He was smart, especially in math, and even won a middle school math award, something no one would have expected from a boy who would later become synonymous with the satanic imagery of metal. Yet despite his intelligence, he never fit in. He transferred through 3 high schools, not out of rebellion, but because he couldn't find anyone who spoke the same language. To him, the world of numbers was neat and clean. The real world was noisy and fake. Then one day, Carrie taught himself to play Cat Scratch Fever by Ted Nugent. When he hit the final note, he felt something like an electric surge through his body, anger, euphoria, and release all at once. From that moment, he dove headfirst into the world of Van Halen, Judas Priest, Iron Maiden, Deep Purple, Black Sabbath, and Venom. Their music wasn't just sound. It was a lifeline for a mind struggling to stay authentic in a world built on pretending. Carrie's teenage years were long nights in a dark room, filled only with guitar noise and the heavy breathing of a boy trying to understand who he was. Few friends, few words, many thoughts. When exhausted, he would just sit and play until his fingertips bled. His father thought it was passion, but in truth, it was the only way Carrie could keep from breaking apart. By 16, Carrie already knew he was different. Different in solitude, different in the way he saw the world. He didn't need to rebel outwardly, he chose to burn quietly inside. And it was that very silence that a few years later would lead him down a narrow hallway in California, where a strange guitar riff caught his attention. One sound, one glance, and within minutes, Kerry King's life would take a turn from which there was no way back. The strange guitar sound Kerry King heard in that hallway changed everything. It didn't just make him stop, it made him realize he had found the missing piece of the music he'd been screaming for in silence. The one playing was Jeff Hanneman, a young guitarist with long hair, chaotic energy, and the same fiery drive burning inside Carrie. They talked briefly, plugged in their guitars, and within minutes of jamming together, both knew they'd found an ally. Not to become famous, but to attack the world. In the early 1980s, Carrie had played in a small local band, a humble beginning that built his confidence and sharpened his hunger for heavier, raw music. When he met Jeff, everything exploded. They started writing riffs, shaping their own sound, and soon gathered kindred spirits. Tom Araya, a biochemistry technician with a voice that could tear through walls, and Dave Lombardo, a young drummer whose speed felt like a storm. In 1981, the four of them sat down and decided on a name: Slayer. No discussion, no justification. It wasn't just a name, it was a declaration. While other bands sang about love, hope, or youth, Slayer sang about war, death, religion, Satan, and the hypocrisy of the world. They didn't want to entertain the audience, they wanted to shock them. From the start, Kerry King shaped the band's identity. Razor-sharp riffs, unconventional song structures, extreme speed, and total defiance. Jeff Hanneman brought chaos, King brought discipline. Between those two poles, the sound of Slayer was born. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't friendly, but it was alive. Just like Carrie himself, raw, honest, and uncompromising. By 1983, while most young bands were dreaming of getting noticed by a record label, Slayer had only a few $100s and a near-insane belief. The entire cost of recording their debut album, Show No Mercy, came from a bank loan taken by Tom Araya's Chilean immigrant parents, who wanted to help their son chase his dream of playing heavy music. They recorded at Track Record Studios in California. No professional sound engineer, no manager, no commercial plan. Just four young men, a few burnt-out amps, and a single obsession: to create music that made people tremble when they heard it. When Show No Mercy was released through the independent label Metal Blade Records, no radio station dared to play it, no TV show invited them, and even record stores hesitated to stock it because of the demonic cover art. But in the underground scene, in smoky clubs packed with leather-clad misfits wearing inverted crosses, Slayer became a phenomenon. In Los Angeles, rumors spread of a band faster than Metallica, heavier than Motorhead. In New York, metal fanzines passed around blurry cassette copies like forbidden contraband smuggled straight from hell. On stage, Kerry King was the eye of the storm. He didn't just play guitar, he attacked it. Every pick stroke was a slash, every feedback scream a roar. King prowled through red smoke and flashing lights, his bald head and demonic tattoos glowing like war paint, leaving the audience unsure whether they were watching a concert or witnessing a ritual sacrifice. Amid the chaos, his guitar ceased to be an instrument. It became a weapon, one that would define an entire era of thrash metal. From a small room in California, Slayer's sound spread like a plague. Fast, vicious, and incurable. Every show was a small explosion, and fans left with ringing ears, pounding hearts, and eyes haunted by the image of a bald guitarist grinning in the middle of the storm. Yet amid all the cheers and blood, Kerry King had no idea that the very thing he was creating, the force that made metal more brutal and real than ever before, would soon begin to consume him. In the beginning, Slayer was dismissed by the media as noisy, extreme, and meaningless, music considered trash compared to the rock standards of the time. But in cramped basements filled with worn leather jackets, headbanging, sweat, and cheap beer, the underground metal community saw Slayer as a fresh wind tearing down every old boundary. They didn't want beauty, they wanted truth. And Kerry King, with his guitar like a razor blade, his riffs sharp enough to slice through the air, became the torchbearer of that raw, unfiltered truth. 3 years after Show No Mercy, Slayer entered the studio with an uncontrollable surge of energy. In 1986, they released Rain in Blood, just 29 minutes long, but every second was an explosion. No excess, no compromise. From the opening drum hit of Angel of Death to the final shredding of Raining Blood, the entire album was a metallic storm that pulverized every limit heavy metal had ever known. Critics called it music from hell. Fans called it the prophecy of a generation in revolt. But Angel of Death also threw Slayer into the heart of controversy. The song depicted Joseph Mengele, the Angel of Death, who conducted human experiments in Auschwitz. The lyrics were too brutal, too real, prompting CBS Epic to refuse its release, fearing accusations of Nazi glorification. Facing backlash, Kerry King coldly replied, "If they're afraid of the truth, then we'll just have to scream louder." And he kept his word. Eventually, Geffen Records stepped in to release Rain in Blood, and within months, it became the defining album of thrash metal, faster, heavier, and more precise than anyone thought possible. From being scorned, Slayer rose to stand shoulder to shoulder with Metallica, Megadeth, and Anthrax, the big four of a new era. The sound born from darkness now ruled the light, and Kerry King, the once lonely kid from California, became the symbol of the storm he had unleashed. What no one knew was that as Slayer climbed to glory, the fire inside Kerry began to burn differently, quietly, fiercely, ready to consume everything he had built. After the earthquake that was Rain in Blood, Slayer didn't pause to celebrate. They moved forward, not to please anyone, but to see how far they could go before they imploded. In 1988, they released South of Heaven, a bold shift that shocked fans. The music slowed down, darker, heavier, echoing like a voice from hell after the storm. Many thought Slayer was softening, but in truth, they were learning to control the darkness instead of being swallowed by it. 2 years later came Seasons in the Abyss, 1990, a perfect fusion of speed and depth, chaos and control. It proved Slayer could do more than scream. They could craft songs both crushing and haunting, precise to the millisecond, like the ticking of death's clock. Tracks like War Ensemble and Dead Skin Mask became classics, cementing Slayer as one of the few bands that both critics and fans bowed to. But Kerry King was never content with safety. In the 1990s, as metal began to slow down, he dragged Slayer into experimental territory few dared to enter. Divine Intervention, 1994, Diabolus in Musica, 1998, and God Hates Us All, 2001, all sparked fierce debate, slower tempos, heavier grooves, touches of new metal influence. Many fans said Slayer had changed, but in truth, this was Kerry King proving that rebellion never ages, it just changes form. Each album was another strike, another experiment, another declaration that Slayer would never repeat itself. Yet amid fiery tours and roaring crowds, Kerry couldn't see that the one thing he couldn't control, not the music, but the people beside him, was about to pull him into a storm no riff could drown out. When a machine runs too long at full speed, cracks inevitably appear. And Slayer, the metal engine Kerry King and his brothers had poured their souls into, was no exception. From the outside, they were solid steel, powerful, flawless, relentless. But inside, the first screeches of metal grinding against metal had already begun, warning of a fracture that no one could ever fully repair. Dave Lombardo, the legendary drummer, the heartbeat of Slayer who turned speed into art, left not once, but twice. Years of simmering financial tension finally erupted. Kerry King demanded transparency, every member accountable, every profit shared fairly. But Lombardo felt betrayed, excluded from the massive touring revenues. Arguments backstage, cold emails, sidelong glances on the tour bus, all of it turned trust into a wound. And when Lombardo set down his sticks for good, the silence of the drums hurt more than a cut-off riff. Then came Tom Araya, longtime friend, bassist, and voice of Slayer, who began to drift away. After decades surrounded by blood, war, and demons, he found something Kerry King could never understand: faith. Araya spoke more about God, redemption, and mercy, ideas alien to Kerry's world. Because Kerry King was an anti-theist, a man who despised organized religion, seeing it as hypocrisy and control. Between them, an invisible wall began to rise, one side light, the other darkness. And in between stood Kerry King, the last man determined to keep Slayer's flame burning in its original color. Despite the turmoil, Kerry never backed down. He kept the band alive with iron discipline and an unshakable belief that Slayer must remain Slayer, or nothing at all. That relentless drive carried them to their greatest heights. Slayer won 2 Grammys for Eyes of the Insane, 2007, and Final Six, 2008, sold over 20 million albums, were named Best Live Band multiple times, and stood forever as one of the Big Four of thrash metal, alongside Metallica, Megadeth, and Anthrax, 4 immortal pillars of an entire generation. By then, Slayer was more than a band. It was its own religion. And Kerry King, standing between light and darkness, became a living symbol of loyalty, endurance, and absolute conviction. Yet amid the roar of thousands of fans and the blinding glare of glory, fate began to shift, quietly, mercilessly, toward the one person Kerry believed would stay with him until the end. Jeff Hanneman, Slayer's co-founder, Kerry's friend, and the twin soul of his creative fire, was the only person who truly understood the blaze inside him. Together, they didn't just write music, they created Slayer's identity. One was order, the other chaos. If Kerry King was the sword, Jeff Hanneman was the storm. They clashed, they sharpened each other, and from that friction came the blinding light that the entire metal world bowed to. But in 2011, a small incident changed everything. One sunny afternoon in his backyard, Hanneman was bitten by a spider. At first, he thought it was nothing, but the infection spread quickly, landing him in the hospital for months. As his health deteriorated, he turned to alcohol to numb the feeling of losing control, and the bottle slowly poisoned him. Addiction, depression, and isolation consumed him over 2 years, until on May 2, 2013, Jeff Hanneman died of liver failure. He was 49. The entire metal world shook. Newspapers ran tributes, fans built shrines, rivals bowed in respect. But Kerry King stayed silent. No statements, no TV appearances, no public mourning. Those close to him said, "He's never been that quiet. When Jeff died, it was like half of Kerry went with him." Because to Kerry, Hanneman wasn't just a bandmate. He was the only person who made him feel less alone. 2 years later, Slayer returned with their final album, Repentless, 2015. Kerry King wrote most of it, and many saw it as his musical eulogy to Hanneman. Repentless carried the wildest energy Slayer had ever unleashed. A vow, a scream in place of tears. Every riff felt like Jeff's breath, raw, real, and undying. When Slayer announced their retirement in 2018, few believed it. But the farewell tour, the final campaign, began, spanning dozens of countries, and ended on November 30, 2019, at the Forum in Los Angeles. Thousands screamed their name, hundreds of lights blazed, and in the final moment, Kerry King removed the legendary chain from his waist, his symbol for more than 30 years, and placed it on the stage. No words, no bow, just a ritual, cold, haunting, final. Slayer was over. The metal world fell silent. People thought Kerry King, after all these years of battle, had finally stopped. But they forgot one thing. When the devil retreats, it doesn't mean he's dead. Sometimes he's just waiting for the perfect moment to rise again. When Slayer's final night came to a close at the Forum in Los Angeles on November 30th, 2019, the chain Kerry King placed on the stage seemed like the end of everything. Fans wept, journalists wrote farewells, and the man who had kept the ship afloat for nearly half a century bowed his head and walked quietly into the darkness. But deep inside, Carrie knew. The fire wasn't dead. It was just waiting to be called upon again. In the early months of 2020, as the world shut down during the pandemic, Kerry King vanished. No stage, no interviews, no social media, just him, his guitar, and his new home in Las Vegas. To many, it looked like he had truly retired, but behind closed doors, surrounded by racks of snakes and silent amplifiers, he kept writing. Every riff was a vow. Slayer can stop, I can't. By late 2021, Carrie began calling his old comrades. First was Paul Bostoff, the drummer who had been with him the longest after Lombardo. Then came Marco Segueda of Death Angel, a younger vocalist with fire in his lungs. Carrie's vision was clear: to create music that carried the soul of Slayer, but wasn't Slayer. Throughout 2022 and 2023, they quietly recorded, releasing no statements, leaving only faint rumors echoing through the metal underground. Kerry King is coming back. In May 2024, after nearly 5 years of silence since Slayer's end, the metal world erupted. Headlines everywhere screamed the same news: Kerry King returns. His debut solo album, From Hell I Rise, was a cold, defiant proclamation. The voice of a man who had walked through ruins and chosen to stand again. There was no Slayer now, but Carrie was far from alone. Around him gathered those who best understood the pulse and the wounds of his music. Paul Bostoff returned, the iron metronome who had driven Slayer's heartbeat for hundreds of shows. Beside him stood Phil Demmel, the former Machine Head guitarist, whose precision cut like a surgeon's blade, and Kyle Sanders of Hell Yeah, grounding everything with a bass tone heavy as falling steel. To complete the circle, Carrie chose Mark Osageda, young, fierce, but respectful enough not to trespass on Slayer's legacy. The four entered a Los Angeles studio in early 2024, and within months, the sound Carrie had been shaping for half a decade was complete. When the first single, Idle Hands, dropped, it exploded, frantic, violent, and furious. Critics called it Slayer reborn without Slayer. But to Kerry King, it wasn't nostalgia. It was a declaration of survival. I don't live in the past, I just drag it forward with my own hands. The From Hell I Rise tour ran from July through the end of 2024, marking Kerry King's long-awaited return to the grand stage. He appeared just as fans remembered him: bald head, coiled muscles, tattoos running from shoulder to wrist, heavy black leather, and his BC Rich Warlock guitar slung from a silver chain, his immortal emblem. No greetings, no explanations, just music and fire. Each song felt like an exorcism. The crowd roared with every riff, not because the sound was perfect, but because they could feel something. The realization that the music they thought had died was still alive, still breathing, still screaming, as if it had never gone silent. By year's end, From Hell I Rise was crowned Metal Album of the Year by Metal Hammer, Revolver, and Loudwire. When a reporter asked how he felt about the accolades, Carrie just shrugged and muttered, "I don't make albums to be praised. I make them because I'm not done yet. When my hands can't hold the strings anymore, that's when it's over." And perhaps that single sentence defines him best. A warrior who doesn't know rest, a man who's lost friends, a band, and his youth, yet still stands amid the ashes, simply to keep burning. Slayer is the past. From Hell I Rise is the present. And the future? No one knows. Because sometimes the most terrifying thing isn't when the fire blazes, but when it decides it will never go out. When the stage lights fade and the final feedback hum dissolves into the air, people often imagine Kerry King returning to the chaos, the loud music, the hard liquor, and the endless rock and roll parties. But the truth is the complete opposite. After every show, he goes straight home, to a place without noise, without crowds, filled only with silence and the steady breathing of the creatures he loves most. Born in the bustling city of Los Angeles, Kerry King chose a life of quiet simplicity. He has been married twice and has one daughter, Cheyenne Kimberly King, from his first marriage. Though he rarely speaks about his family, close friends say he is a strict but devoted father, raising his daughter the same way his own father once raised him. Honesty and persistence are the only two things no one can ever take from you. Since 2020, Carrie and his current wife, Aisha King, have moved from California to Las Vegas and later settled in New York. They live in a modern but modest home, quiet enough for him to hear every sound of life and spacious enough to house his most unusual companions, snakes. Behind the fierce image of a metal warrior, Kerry King is deeply passionate about herpetology, the study of reptiles and amphibians. He owns hundreds of rare snakes, kept in his private facility called Psychotic Exotics, where he personally cares for, studies, and breeds them. To Carrie, snakes are more than pets. They're symbols of survival and rebirth. They shed their skin to keep living, he once said, just like I've had to shed everything that ever tried to stop me. Aside from snakes, Carrie also trains and raises dogs, often entering them in competitions. He has said that training animals taught him how to be patient again, something the stage could never teach. In the harsh world of metal, where everything is measured by speed and aggression, Kerry King has found peace in the slowest movements. Despite his bluntness and tough exterior, Kerry King has almost no scandals to his name. He's never used drugs, though he openly admits, "I'm a seasoned drinker." Even so, he keeps strict discipline, never drinking before a show and always staying sharp when holding his guitar. Many see him as a rebel, but in truth, he lives more like a soldier, disciplined, solitary, and fully in control. From the outside, that life may seem cold, but for Carrie, it's the only way to stay whole. He doesn't believe in God, heaven, or hell. He believes only in music, instinct, and the duty to keep playing until it's truly over. Someone once asked him, "If you ever stop playing guitar, what would you do?" Carrie chuckled, his raspy voice dry and certain. "I'd take care of my snakes. At least they never betray anyone." A half-joking, half-painful line. It sounds cold at first, but behind it lies the loneliness of a man who has lost nearly everything, yet still chooses to love the world in his own way. Between the screams of his past and the silence of his present, Kerry King isn't searching for peace. He's creating it. And perhaps, in that quiet, we can finally see him clearly. The man who once made the world tremble with his riffs is now simply learning to listen to the rhythm of his own heart. If, in his private life, Kerry King chooses silence, then on stage, he is an unmistakable force of nature. The gleaming bald head, the long beard cascading down his chest, the tattoos covering his arms, flames, skulls, chains, and symbols of death all form the image of a true metal warrior. Resting on his shoulder, the V-shaped BC Rich guitar isn't just an instrument, it's a weapon, one that has helped him conquer millions of fans across 4 decades. Carrie needs no elaborate costumes or lavish lights. The moment he steps on stage, grips his strings, and lowers his head, the entire metal world knows he's there. That image, fierce, honest, and uncompromising, has made Kerry King one of the most revered and feared figures in the scene. Brutally straightforward, he has never been afraid to speak his mind. In dozens of interviews, Carrie has openly criticized major bands, from Metallica to Machine Head to Slipknot, and mocked the trend of commercial metal embraced by newer generations. He once said, "Metal wasn't born to please anyone. It was born to say what no one else dares to say." It might sound arrogant, but for Carrie, that's survival instinct, the belief in truth, even when the truth makes you unpopular. He doesn't chase trends or bend to fit the times. Faced with movements like cancel culture or the woke movement, Carrie stands firm. If you can't handle a few hard words, you don't belong in rock. People call him stubborn, but in truth, he's simply honest to the bone. "I don't need everyone to love me," he said in a 2022 interview. "I just need the ones who understand me not to leave." And that's what sets Kerry King apart. Not because he fights against the world, but because he dares to live by his own nature, even as the world keeps changing. Today, at 60, he still stands on stage the same way he always has, legs wide apart, chains swinging, eyes blazing toward the crowd. Yet behind that fiery gaze lies something different now. Not anger, but the quiet strength of a man who's learned that true power isn't in the scream, but in the ability to stand firm when all the noise has faded away. And that's where the story turns. No longer about music, but about legacy. The mark of a man who never surrendered, who walked through hell and left behind a scar that bears his name. As 2025 begins, Kerry King isn't just keeping the metal flame alive, he's pushing it further. In January, he launched a North American tour spanning over a month from San Francisco to Las Vegas, with 28 fiery nights alongside guest acts like Municipal Waste and Alien Weaponry. The shows weren't nostalgic. They were a declaration. "I don't need Slayer to play music, I just need my guitar." Less than 6 months later, he took the stage across Europe in the summer of 2025, performing at some of the continent's biggest metal festivals: Brutal Assault, Motoculture, Dynamo Open Air, and more. At each venue, he appeared exactly as fans remembered: bald, bearded, draped in heavy chains, wielding his V-shaped BC, rich like a battle flag. His riffs still sliced like blades, and even as the audience grew younger, no one dared deny it. Kerry King remained the storm that metal needed to survive. Amid that packed schedule, he surprised fans by appearing at San Diego Comic-Con 2025, signing autographs at the artist Shag's booth, chatting and taking photos with fans. The sight of the metal legend standing amid a retro pop art crowd delighted the media. Even when he's not playing, he's still an artist. Not stopping there, Carrie confirmed he's in the early stages of his second solo album, once again joined by drummer Paul Bostaph and his familiar lineup. He revealed that more than 10 demos are already complete, with a sound even heavier than From Hell I Rise. When asked why he doesn't rest, Carrie simply replied, "Because I've never known what rest feels like." Yet between the flights, the shows, and the thousands of screaming fans, there are rare moments when people catch a glimpse of Carrie sitting quietly backstage, guitar in hand, eyes distant. Perhaps he's thinking of Jeff Hanneman, of the past, or of the years that will never return. Because even though the world sees him as the embodiment of strength, inside, Kerry King is still just a man who doesn't know how to stop. Because to stop means to be silent, and silence is the one thing he fears most. Nearly half a century has passed since a boy in Los Angeles first picked up his father's old Gibson ES-175. In that time, Kerry King has completed the journey of a musical warrior. From cramped bars to the world's biggest arenas, he turned Slayer into one of the 4 pillars of thrash metal, and along the way, redefined what extreme could mean in music. In the world of metal, where the line between art and chaos is always razor thin, Kerry King never chose the easy path. He transformed speed, rage, and darkness into a language that spoke for those who never truly belonged anywhere. From Rain in Blood to Seasons in the Abyss, his music wasn't just a storm, it was an unfiltered truth. That humanity is both terrifying and fragile, fallen yet desperate for redemption. Kerry's riffs, short, sharp, and merciless, directly shaped an entire generation. Pantera, Sepultura, Lamb of God, Slipknot, Machine Head, Trivium. From underground clubs in Los Angeles to massive European festivals, His breath still echoes in every guitar tone. Even artists outside the genre, from Marilyn Manson to Corey Taylor, have admitted, "Slayer made us realize there are no limits in music." But Kerry King's greatest legacy isn't found in technique or accolades. It lies in absolute honesty. In a world where everyone wants to be loved, he chose to be understood. In an industry that constantly bends to fit the market, he stayed loyal to his essence. No marketing, no gimmicks, no pretending, only truth, even when that truth made others uncomfortable. To metal fans, Kerry King isn't just a guitarist. He's the embodiment of defiance, a man who never let any power define him, never bowed to commerce or fame. He turned his entire life into a single declaration: live fiercely but live truthfully. Not everyone has the courage to live inside the same fire for a lifetime, but Kerry King has. He doesn't seek salvation, praise, or understanding. He simply chooses to stand in the storm he created, letting his music speak every word his mouth never needed to. Now, at 60, while the world around him grows softer, his gaze remains sharp as steel, and his scarred hands still grip the neck of his guitar. The world may forget many things, but those who have ever heard Raining Blood at Midnight will never forget that feeling, the one that only those who dare to face the truth can ever create. Kerry King doesn't promise heaven, nor does he lead anyone to safety. He merely points the way for those who still believe that music doesn't need to be accepted. It only needs to be real. And what about you? When that guitar roars again, what do you hear within yourself? Anger, faith, or a piece of your soul still waiting to be set free? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Because who knows, maybe you will be the one to write the next chapter of the fire called Kerry King.